Hi, everyone. Welcome to Restitch America. My name is Alma Ohene-Opare, and I am your host. And this is the podcast where we mend the fabric of our nation, one thread and one story at a time. And in today's episode, we're going to be welcoming a friend of mine, once again, another person I met at a TP USA event. And we have been following each other since then. And I love her content. And I wanted to bring her to talk about something that has been on my heart for a very long time. I became American, as many of you know, in 2021. And when I became American, I understood that I am still who I am. I am still, in the end, a mixture of everything, my culture, my history, and everything that has made me who I am today. And by becoming American, I didn't lose any of that. But I believe being American should mean something more. And that's the discussion we're going to have today. Before we jump into the discussion, if you're not following this podcast, please do. This is really helpful to us. It's just pushing a single button, but it makes a difference for us. So go follow our podcast and share it with your family and friends as well. Another thing I'd like you to do is go to willfulpositivity.com. Willfulpositivity.com is our community. The reason I emphasize that is because the discussions we have on the podcast are based on articles I've written on willfulpositivity.com. So if you want to be in the know and be prepared for our discussions on the podcast, it is really awesome if you can read the articles before you do so, because that way you have a foundation on what we're talking about. So today's article is titled Immigration Without Assimilation is a Threat to National Identity. So before we begin, I'm going to ask our guest to tell us who she is, and we want to get to know you a little bit.
Hello, everybody. I am Cler Patriot. I do political commentary across most social media networks. My mother is actually a legal immigrant, so this discussion is really important to me because I love our country so much. And if she hadn't come here, I wouldn't be afforded all of the opportunities I have. And I do think it's important, the message that you're trying to get across about assimilation in this country and how we can continue to honor our own culture without pushing our roots away.
Exactly. Exactly. So tell us a little bit, where are you located?
I am in Florida now. I was in Illinois before, but I am in Florida now.
You escaped?
I escaped, yes.
How long were you in Illinois under
um
Pritzker?
I was there, so I grew up there, moved to California, and then came back to Illinois. So I went from two different, why did I go blue to blue? I don't know. But I was there for most of my life. And then I've been in Florida for like 7 months now. It's
Oh, okay.
amazing.
So it's new.
Yeah.
That is awesome. How do you like Florida outside of not so cold compared to Illinois?
It is very nice here, and I feel more so that I can go out and be myself. In Illinois, just wearing a hat could cause you problems. But here, everybody's so nice. Everybody is so accepting and just very kind. Southern hospitality probably is some of it, but everybody's like, "Hi, how you doing?" And it's not like that back
I
home.
thought Illinois was MAGA country.
No.
If you know, you know, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, so thank you so much for telling us about yourself. What do you do in general outside of political commentary? Are you, what's your business background? What do you how do you support yourself?
So now this is what I do. But before I mean my kids were home, so I was homeschooling them, but I also have a background in marketing. So
Okay.
that's what I would do on the side, especially during the COVID times where things were a little bit harder. I would just be doing my online stuff to bring in some extra income. But my kids are older now and can go to school, and I trust that, especially in Florida. So now I do this.
That is awesome. That is awesome. So I don't know if you know this about me, but I have four kids and two of them are in college. Anytime I say that to people, people are like, you look very young.
You don't look like you have kids in college.
Yeah, I have two kids in college and then I have a 13 and a 9-year old. And so I am half of the way towards my empty nest, and so it's coming so fast, and
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to. I am not looking forward to having all of them gone because it moves really really fast. All right, so let's start our conversation here. So um, the title once again of the article was "Immigration Without Assimilation is a Threat to National Identity." So first, I want to ask a question around why you think it is necessary for us to have a national identity. Why can't we just be a collection of individuals with our own individual, identities? I mean, that's the world we live in today, right? It's everybody crafting their own identity. Why do we need a national identity?
I think that's what has held us together in the past and made us have this pride of being American, that we can come together and just know. Even when I was a kid, I was like, they're American. We're together. And I think that kind of held everything together. And now everybody's wanting their own identities. And it's kind of just making us all into these little cliques almost. If you think about high school, everybody splits off instead of just being one unit. And I think that that is causing a lot of issues in our country.
Yeah, definitely. And as an immigrant, and I'm sure your mom had the same experience, coming in here, there was a culture shock, right? There was a difference, something that I had to change. And for me, a lot of people hear me today and they say, "You don't have an accent." I came to America with a very thick accent, and I had to, and I wouldn't say that I gave up my accent, but I would say it's impossible to live among people and embrace them and not in some way begin to look like or become like them, right? And so every now and then you hear your kids come home and they start a new phrase and you're like, where did you hear that? And it's because they hang out with people who say that and eventually and so there is the physical aspects of assimilation where you start to speak a little differently. Maybe some people who are from non-English countries learn English and so on and so forth. So those will happen naturally, right? Those things happen naturally. It is impossible to get away from them unless you create a system that makes it so you don't get away from them. And what has happened recently in the news, we've been talking about different communities that have basically been overrun in the sense that, people have left their home countries and they've come and created basically mini versions of their home country inside another country. And they have attempted, by so doing, to begin to implement their own culture, their own way of life. And in some cases, they've attempted to implement their own laws and legal systems in those countries. We're seeing this in the UK very significantly, but even in America, we're still seeing that happening in various enclaves. So let's talk about that. In the article, I talked about the fact that we need a national identity because, like you said, the national identity is what makes you and I, even though we're from different parts of the world, even though we naturally may not have anything in common, a national identity is what brings us together. A national identity is what, lets me see you wearing an American flag or flying an American flag and saying, I can trust this person, right? I can go towards this person. And a few months ago, I actually did a poll. I did a poll on one of my videos where I said, if you were stranded anywhere else, anywhere in the country, would you feel comfortable going to a home that is flying an American flag? And would that mean something to you? Right? And a lot of people responded and said, yes. Like if I saw a home that was flying an American flag, I could assume that there is a certain set of values that I can expect. And that can give me comfort and that can give me a sense of belonging. And that is the thing that we need to build. What do you think about a national identity surrounding, our founding as a country, our flag, our national anthem, and what it means to be American?
I think you've said it already, Alma. I will clarify my feelings. So I think it is important. And you asked if I would feel safe going to someone with a flag, and I would, and I have. Like my tire has popped on the side of the road. There's a row of houses. I see one with a flag, and I'm like, I'm going there because I know that they're going. So I think that is important. I think having pride for our country and showing that you want to be a part of it makes others be like, yes, that's my ticket to getting someone to come change my tire.
Yeah, I love that. I love that a lot because when I have gone back to my home country to visit, and I see someone there with an American flag, immediately I'm gravitating towards that person to say, "Where are you from? Where do you live?" And there is this sense of camaraderie that is immediately established, which is something that we need to have a cohesive community, to have a cohesive country. However, we have this pull today that is basically saying, like we said, let's embrace a different identity to the point where I have seen videos of people who are saying, hey, when I see an American flag, that's an actual red flag to me.
I've seen that too.
I
Yeah.
know, right?
Yeah.
It's completely mind-boggling to me that we've gotten so far away from our pride in our country that people have said that if you fly your flag, that could be a threat to some immigrant who is here. What do you think about that?
I think those immigrants came here and they should see a flag and be like, wow, I want to be a part of that because they have so much pride." And it shouldn't be the other way around where they're thinking that we're some threat because we have pride for our country. Why don't we all have pride together? Not think that it's something that's out to get you.
Exactly, right? And so I wanted you to share a little bit about your mom's story, right? What was her journey like? Where did she come from? And what has been her experience here and her sentiments toward America?
So she actually came over during the Vietnam War. Her first husband was a U.S. military member, and she had my brother, and she actually was, some of her family were the bad guys. Um,
Interesting.
so she made a huge sacrifice by living on the base and helping the American soldiers, and even telling them, hey, like you need to be safe on certain days. So when things got really bad and her husband ended up tragically passing away, um, they got her out of there and brought her to Hawaii first. And they ended up getting her a sponsor family in Ohio. So she goes to Ohio. And, you know, this whole time, I don't know if you had to do it, but she was taking classes on American culture, English, different things that they set her up with. And this sponsor family helped her, but she had to pay back anything that was given to her. Like she didn't get anything for free. I remember even when I was a child, fast forward a little bit, we're still going to these classes so that she can pass the Constitution test. And we were going up to Chicago so she could go to her meetings with immigration. Like she really, really wanted it. And I remember I was very young when she became actually an American citizen, but she was so proud. Like she was so excited, and it was like she knew things were fine. It's almost like she was adopted by America. Like she was so happy, and her sponsor family actually came out and they were so proud of her. And I remember how much work it was and how much it cost and how much pride she had. And that's how my whole family is on that side. They have so much pride for this country because they went through the work to earn it. You know what I mean?
Exactly. I love that story so much because that is what I think is missing here. We talk about America as a place of economic opportunity for a lot of people. And so people are migrating here because they want food, they want opportunity, they want money, and so on. But food and money does not make an identity, right? If I saw a homeless person and I have compassion on that homeless person and I gave them money and I gave them food and I gave them a place to sleep, right? That does not necessarily create a relationship such that I can trust them, you know, staying in my house where my kids are, right? And so just giving resources to somebody who appears to be in need is not the end and should never be the end of any kind of immigration process. And so one of the things I talk about in the article is that our immigration process has to be intentional. It is not a welfare program for people from poor countries, right? Our immigration should be more than that. Our immigration should seek to find people who have the aptitude, the potential, and the willingness not only to bring their time and their talents and their skills and their culture, but their willingness to join us, to join the cause of freedom, to join the cause of liberty. And they have to have a willingness to adopt our constitution and our way of life. Okay, there are certain cultural traits in different communities that are completely antithetical to the American way of life, right? There are certain things that happen, for instance, in my country, that I would never agree for those things to be exported into America, right? And unfortunately, it seems like we have taken the approach in America of, let them come here, let them get the economic opportunity, and we absolutely have no responsibility to make sure that they actually love this country, or that they're not going to use the resources that we give them to fight against us from the inside.
Yeah.
And that is happening all over the
Yes,
country.
it is. Unfortunately.
Yeah. And so, what would you say should be done if you were to propose something? What would you say? You talked about your mom having to go through some kind of assimilation program, and it appears to me that it was formal. It wasn't some kind of informal, random,
No.
go read the Daily Beast and figure out what America is, or go read the 1619 Project that tells you America was built on racism and built on white
Yes.
supremacy, right? We need to have some kind of consensus on what we want people to assimilate
So
to.
I
So, what
I
would you
think
say?
what she went through in these classes, I think that that should be necessary. Excuse me. I think that maybe I this sounds I feel pretty extreme on my beliefs with it, but I do think that we need to absolutely make sure that people that are coming here want to assimilate and make it accessible for them. And I maybe going through these, classes and just this is how things work in this country rather than just pushing them in and having them go to their own closed off little cultures that they've created pockets in this country. I don't think that's the way. And I mean, my solution would be going back to the way where they're, taking the English classes and taking these courses on things that maybe are appropriate and inappropriate in their country. But it's not like I'm not saying slam them with information and tell them they must do this, but I do think it might help because I think my mom wouldn't have known a lot of those things had she not gone through this.
And I think it begins with not being ashamed of who we are, right? Because it seems like there's a narrative that because of our unfortunate history with slavery and Jim Crow and other things, that we have no
Yeah.
moral high ground to stand on to say, hey, you need to assimilate to American culture. So it's almost like we are ashamed of our own culture. And so we feel like if we are ashamed of something, how can we impose that on somebody else, right? And I think that timidity, that is where it comes from, is this idea that we are not perfect. So how can we ask other people to give up what they've done or how they've lived in order to assimilate to something different? But recently I had a conversation with some folks at PragerU, and what I was trying to talk about with them was establishing a an
Yeah.
assimilation program, just like you were talking about, right? An assimilation program that teaches people about our founding, teaches the conditions that spurred the founding of this country, teaches them about freedom, teaches them about rights and where those rights come from, teaches them about their responsibilities to the country, their what loyalty to the country means, teaching them about how our banking works, how our credit system works, how, buying a house, investing, all those things work. Imagine if someone came to America and instead of being ushered into a welfare building, they're taught that if you invest $100, you know, every month, you can compound that over 20 years and be financially independent, right? These are things that we can teach as part of our assimilation. I think a lot of times when people think assimilation, they're thinking, oh, you're
Yeah,
going to indoctrinate people on American, why America is better than other places. But that's not it. It's about making sure that those people don't become burdens. But the way you do that is to equip them with the knowledge they need to actually thrive in our
I agree.
system.
Yeah.
And I remember a couple of people, friends of mine, who came to America because they won the visa lottery. And immediately, as soon as they got off the plane, like there were people already here saying, go apply for food stamps, go apply for this, go apply for, get yourself on the Section 8 housing waiting list, go do this. And I'm like, is this how we're welcoming people into our country? To immediately put them
I
on the
don't
dole?
understand.
How?
Because, back in the day, you had to be able to prove that you could support yourself. You had a plan and you
Mhm.
weren't going to end up on any sort of welfare services. So hearing that, I'm like,
Seriously. And I actually had an experience like that. When I graduated from college, I moved to Washington State because I was hired by Microsoft. And so I moved to Washington State, and this was my first time in, living a regular life with a wife and kids in a very blue state. And they had very generous, benefits and things like that. And so one of the things that we did was we went to, change our driver's licenses. And so we get to the place, the DMV, to change our driver's licenses or to apply for a new driver's license. And we learned about all sorts of things. Oh, there's this program, there's that program. And they didn't even check at the time if we were legally in the country because it was not necessary. So we got driver's licenses, we got all sorts of things. And I remember I had a friend who also worked with me at Microsoft, but he had structured his life in such a way that his wife was not legally on any kind of document, his wife. And so his wife could go and collect all the benefits while they were still kind of married and living together, but they had gamed the system. And Washington State was just looking the other way, right? And so you have these things where we are training the people who are coming into our country to be on the public dole, but not just to be on the public dole, but to lie, steal, and cheat their way onto the public dole. So when I hear the story about what is happening in Minnesota, I'm like, this is by design. This was not by accident, right? And now people might think that this is harsh, to be strict about who comes here and what they're allowed to do. What do you say to people who think it is harsh? Because I'm sure your mom had some times that was difficult for her. What do you say to people who say, requiring all these proofs and requiring all these restrictions is cruel?
I like to, I am, I am pretty like hard on that narrative because if you give somebody everything, they're never going to work for anything. Like they're never going to try. And that is, I feel like my tough love approach. If you're saying that these people should just be handed everything and that we should just look the other way, they don't need to work for anything, then how are they ever going to go and live on their own? Or is that in your intention if you're saying that they should be given everything? Do you think they can't? They aren't capable of earning it? You know what I mean? So I I think that's a big huge disconnect we have between the two parties in our country is that one side is like give them everything. Give them everything. And at the end of the day, you're basically saying that you don't think that they're capable, in my opinion. And coming from a family of immigrants, I don't see how anybody couldn't see that that's not helping anybody. That's holding them back.
Exactly. And one of the things that for me offends me is when I hear things like, We need these people here because we have these types of jobs, right? That we need people to do because Americans wouldn't do those jobs. That is, I think, the
Yeah.
true definition of racism, where you limit a person's aptitude, you limit a person's choices. You basically are saying that given a choice, those people would choose to do those kinds of jobs that Americans don't want. So you are imputing upon those people a certain framework, a certain mindset, a certain limitation, which is the definition of racism, right? You are basically saying because of this person's status, race, national origin, that they should be limited to a certain scope of the of what is available to Americans, which is inherently racist. And so that offends me a lot. But one of the other things that we talk about when we talk about assimilation is first we have to establish whether we are on the same page with our fellow Americans. So many of us think that we want to save our country, save the Constitution, uphold the rule of law. The question is increasingly, I wonder whether there are factions in the country that actually want to do the opposite. They want to abolish the Constitution. They actually want to tear apart, our framework, denigrate our founders, remove our symbols, and change everything. So before we can even begin any kind of coherent assimilation program, we first have to ask ourselves, are we on the same page with others
No, we are
in this
very much
country? What do you
not.
think about that?
I see it on a daily basis, to be honest, because I do look at a lot of their content for my content. And that is one of the things I'm seeing a lot is these people literally want to just get rid of everything that is America because they feel that it's broken. But I'm like, they think that's the way to fix it. And I don't think they understand that we all need to come together, and taking it apart isn't. What do you think you're going to rebuild it as? Like, what is your plan other than just, I feel they, a part of it is that they are unhappy because things did not go their way, so they'd rather just get rid of it all. And I'm like, maybe if we all came together instead and tried to build on what we have and what's worked for many many years, things wouldn't you wouldn't feel that way. Like,
Exactly. And the analogy that makes sense to me when I think about this is the story in the Old Testament of King Solomon and the two women who had they had two babies, and one of the babies had died, right? So if you're familiar with this story, basically, Solomon is the king. They bring two women to Solomon, and they say these women are fighting over a baby. They were both sleeping next to each other, and when they woke up, one of the babies was dead. And so um, they were fighting over whose baby was the one that was alive. And so they brought the two women in front of the king, and the king said, okay, since we can't decide which baby belongs to which woman, let's do this. Let's split the baby. So if you've heard the phrase split the baby, that's what it means. Let's split the baby. So he called one of the guards, took a sword. We will split the baby. We will give half of it to you and half of it to the other woman. And immediately, the woman whose baby it really was said, don't split the baby, give it to the other person. I would rather the baby live and be with this other person than for the baby to die so I can have this twisted idea of justice, right? And that's where I feel like we are as a country. There are people who would rather split the baby than see the other person win, right? And that is what is happening to President Trump, to the point where people are willing to side with the terrorists. They're willing to side with Iran. They're willing to side with the cartels. They're willing to side with everything that we've traditionally accepted were existential threats to America. They're willing to side with those things because they hate the other part of the country so deeply, and so they want to split the baby. And so how what do you do? I know you encounter a lot of this, and I see that in your content. You respond to a lot of people who are making these claims about America. So before we can even begin our assimilation, what do you think we can do to actually see eye to eye with our fellow Americans? How can we restitch
That's a
America
hard
again?
one. I think my so I was a Democrat for many years, but I grew up in a very democratic state, and then my thinking is, if I continue to show these people the truth where there's been lies and propaganda and put it in their face, that some of them will start to realize and come over and be like, hey, let's work together. And so I think that's been what I've been trying to do. And I've had a lot of people have messaged and said, thank you, I saw the light. I think we need to educate and show these people where they've been lied to, so that they will see, hey, we don't need to split that baby. We don't need to destroy this country. We need to maybe turn off the things that you're watching that are, making you feel that you need to do that.
Exactly. And one of the things I've always told people is look at the person you're speaking to as a potential convert. Like today, someone will be looking at you and saying, "Oh, Cler Patriot is a complete right wing, you know, crazy." Right? They might say that, but not realize that you came from their perspective a few years ago, right? And so let's talk about the transition. How, what instigated the transition, and how can we use that as a pattern for those of us who say we have seen the light and we want others to see it too? What happened with you, and then how
So it
can we
was during
model that?
Obama, and I started to notice just a few things, like what the media would say he was saying, and it was very divisive, and like how pointing out things in our country. But then I would go do research, and it wasn't necessarily the whole story. And then also Trump comes into the picture, and that was a big one, because they would say he said these horrible things, and at first I was like, yeah, that's terrible, why would he say that about a disabled person, things like that. But I started to actually watch the full clip and not pay attention, because I was like, this just doesn't seem right, because if you watch the whole video as it's happening, that's not what they're reporting on. And I started to put two and two together, that he wasn't a bad guy. He was a really good guy. And that they were making it seem a certain way. So I think for me, my thinking is, if I show people, like, because what happened to me, I always encourage people, do your own research, watch the whole clip. Don't trust, even if take what I say. I'm only talking to you for a minute. I'm giving you clues as to where you need to look. Go and see for yourself. I urge you, because I think if we can get people to watch things live, watch the full clip, that they're going to see a difference in what's being reported to them. Because I do think the media is pushing a lot of fear driven narratives in order to keep them on that side.
Isn't it strange when you hear people in 2025
Yeah.
talk about the fine people hoax? You're like, really? You are that insulated that you have not
There's
figured
so
out that
many
that was a
things
complete
they will
hoax?
still come and say, and I'm like, this was disproven. Like, you can actually, it's not a conspiracy that it was disproven. It was disproven. Please go do your research. Don't believe this.
That is so true. But is there the same tendency on the right as well? Are there factions on the right that are also saying, trust me, bro, right? Don't go look. I have the truth. I am the only one who is telling you the truth. Everybody else is part of a giant conspiracy. Is there that kind of
Yes.
sentiment
And
as well
right
on the
now,
right?
especially, we are seeing that a lot of people have gone so far right that they're very much so acting the same as the left. Yeah. And
The
I,
horseshoe theory, as they call it. You go all the way
yes. And
around
that's what
until
I'm
you
seeing
come
a
to the
lot
other
of.
side.
And I'm like, guys, we had already like come together on our side. Can we hold it together so we can try to get the other ones? And see that, no, they're like, we're going in in that horseshoe. Um, there is a lot of people. I think there's a lot of mistrust after all the events of 2020. I think a lot of people have a really hard time with that. And now we're seeing even more division. And I am just like, can we just hold it together for 2026, guys? Like, we have this election coming up. Like, come on, the right, let's stick together.
I know, and that's one thing that I have attempted to do with my content, because I ask myself, what is the goal? At the end of the day, what is the goal? And if your goal is to tear things apart, if your goal is to destroy what has been built, if your goal is to turn people against one another, right? What does that accomplish?
It doesn't accomplish
What does
anything.
that accomplish, right? It doesn't accomplish anything. It creates factions. It destroys the gains that we've made. It destroys America because those people who are claiming to be on the patriot side of the American conversation, those people are now fracturing because of these factions and what I call Pied Pipers. So these are the people who are blowing their horns in a way that is the Bible talks about people having itching ears. So they want to hear what they want to hear. And people have seen that need. As a marketer, you know how to do that, right? You see the need and you're like, I gotta fill that need. I need to take on that niche, right? And so I'm gonna move my content in that direction so I can capture that audience. And unfortunately, it's happening on the left, it's happening on the right. And at the end of the day, what is important is the thing we're fighting for, which is American cohesion, an American identity that is coherent. And it is impossible to ask foreigners to join and sign up onto the American Patriot movement if they can't see the unity that the Patriot movement brings, right? Because if it looks exactly like the divisiveness they were leaving in their home country, they would say rather,
Yeah.
let me just stay with what I know. I don't have to extend myself into American politics. I don't have to open my mouth. I'll just be in my insular community, you know, not expand out of that community. And then you end up
Yeah.
with situations like Minnesota, right? Okay, so let's talk about faith. A lot of immigrants come to our country with various religious backgrounds. And America, of course, is a country that was built on religious freedom. And so, my question is, how can faith and tradition coexist while also embracing the American civic identity?
So I do think as Americans, we should be able to have all of our own religions. But also, I think some of the religions we're seeing and some of the extreme beliefs may not be something that is good for our country. But like, where do you draw a line? You know what I mean? That's where I struggle because I'm like, I know this sort of thing shouldn't be something that's included in our culture, but like, I can't, as an American, that is also their right. So, like, what do you do with that?
Exactly. And the way I look at it and the way I reconcile my understanding of the Constitution and our rights to free exercise of religion versus some of the things that are happening here is to look at it from this perspective. You have the ability, the right to worship whoever you want. I believe personally that, we claim the privilege of worshiping Almighty God according to the dictates of our own conscience. And we allow all men the same privilege, let them worship how, where, or what they may. That's my creed, my personal creed. Let them worship how they want. Now, where it becomes a little different is that in our worship, we also have to understand the Constitution. Because our Constitution guarantees certain rights, those rights are inalienable or unalienable. And what that means is that those rights are not granted by the government. So if you have a religious standard and that religious standard begins to infringe on the rights of individuals, then that becomes a problem. And we should be bold enough to speak about it. Because in that sense, this is no longer an exercise of your religion, but an exercise of the denial of somebody of their human rights. And that is the framework that we need to adopt when talking about this. So you can have your religion, but as soon as your religion begins to infringe on the free exercise of other people's autonomy, then that is when the government should step in and when good-natured and patriotic Americans should say no more. So you cannot tell me that your religion allows you to abuse a woman and then claim that based on my religious standard, America should accept that, right? You cannot say that your religion allows for mutilation of, you know, genital parts without a person's consent or choice and then claim that I want to bring that into America because it is part of my religion or my culture, right? And so all these things are, I think, is we can draw the line and say, exercise your religion, but if your religion begins to infringe on a free people's ability to live their lives, that that becomes antithetical to what it means to be American, and
Yeah,
we have to put a
I
stop to that.
agree. I love the way you put that
What do
because
you think?
I've been sitting on it and thinking, because I am such an advocate for us to, for our constitutional rights, but these things, they can't go on in our country and we can't accept that. And you can't just fall back on this is my religious beliefs while you're hurting somebody else. Um, Marrying young people, we cannot allow that to come into our country. And that's something that one religion seems to be okay with, and those things absolutely not. So I think what you said is perfect, and it's actually going to help me in the future.
Exactly. I think, and that's one thing that I think, as people who are advocating for assimilation, we need to figure out how to have these difficult conversations, right? Because unfortunately for America, the fact that we have these freedoms and the fact that they're guaranteed by the Constitution also means that they're guaranteed to our enemies who are within, right? And because of that, those people who are campaigning for the destruction of our country will leverage those same freedoms, and they literally say it. They say it in our faces. They tell us, hey, go to America and go and say these incendiary things, sow hatred, sow division. But then I recently saw a video where someone is like,
Yeah.
we would never allow that in our country. Like, we would never allow a Westerner to come to our country and denigrate our laws and denigrate our customs and denigrate our traditions and start preaching to people to leave, our religion or whatever the case may be. Like, we would never allow that, but we will leverage the fact that America allows that to destroy them from within. And I think it is about time, as I said in the beginning, that we stand boldly and unashamedly for our culture, our way of life. And our way of life and our culture has nothing to do with a person's ethnicity, has nothing to do with a person's religion. It has everything to do with a person's humanity and a person's ability to thrive, to pursue happiness, and to thrive. And that is what our Constitution guarantees, that you would have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That is what I believe is American culture. And the ambition to go and pursue that happiness in a lawful way
Yeah.
is what we should be teaching people to do. Right? All right. So one last question. I think we're getting close to the end here. Um, if you could propose one policy, one cultural shift, or one civic initiative to improve assimilation and unity in America, what would it be and why?
That's tough. I have a couple. I think I do think a policy where we're having to do some sort of assimilation courses, like I said before, would be great. But I also think maybe, people need to come in with the ability or a plan to take care of themselves because they're capable of it. They're capable of that. And I think that would, if you work for it, you're going to be proud of it. And I think that's something that we're lacking right now.
Okay, so the ability to not be on the government dole initially.
Oh, yeah.
There are, of course, exceptions of scenarios where people are literally fleeing, life and death situations, where you say, okay, but the goal should always be, let's get you temporary help so you're stabilized, and then let's immediately turn the conversation into how do you
Yes.
become
Yeah.
self reliant. All right. And then, final question, empathy. So people talk about, you are a xenophobe if you speak about immigration in this way or that way. So many immigrant fear that when we call for assimilation, we're basically calling for an erasure of their culture and who they are. So, what do you say about that? And how do we make sure that immigrants who are coming here don't feel like we're asking them to give up who they are just to be part of this idea of America?
So I
How do
think
we speak about that?
it's important for them to want to be a part of our society and not just close themselves off. But we're not saying to erase who you are. I mean, I am still very much so Vietnamese. Like that's what we do in our home and we love it and we bring people in. We don't just like close ourselves off. Like we're like, hey, try our egg rolls. Hey, come over. You want to try it? And the neighbors love it. But at that same time, I feel like the closing off of those communities is that's a problem. Like you people would love to learn about your culture, but that doesn't mean that that's all you have to be in this country. It's important to be included and to want to be included and to be a part of our society at that same time.
Exactly. I think it's really important. And I remember when I got my letter with the date that I was going to be sworn in to become an American, I went and bought my first American flag. Now, many people, I was here for 18 years before I became a citizen, and people would ask, why didn't you have an American flag for all 18 years? And so some people asked me that question, and I said, for some reason, for me, I just felt like I had not been fully accepted yet. I was not American yet. And I meant, and for me, it meant that this was something I was working towards. I wanted to earn it, right? I wanted to earn it, and I wanted to be able to go to that store and say, I am buying this flag and I'm putting down the flag because I have become American, right? And I learned the American national anthem before I ever came to America. And and I don't know very many Americans who know the second verse or the third verse of the national anthem, but I do. And I remember when I put my hand on my heart for the first time as an American to join in the national anthem, because most of the time I would sing, but I was like, I am not yet American. And I'm waiting for the day when I can put my hand on my heart and feel like I was literally pledging my allegiance to the country. And for me, yes, there was a moment where I felt like, am I giving up who I am, by embracing America, especially on social media, because people from my home country, even my family, my sisters are still in my home country. My dad is still there, and my cousins and all these people. So I started to feel like, the more I talk about America and why I believe I'm fighting for America and all, does that create this weird tension with my own family at home? And am I kind of denigrating who they are because they are not American? But then I thought, as I said to you before we began this call, that being American is not leaving anything behind. Yes, there are some cultural things that you might have to change and mindsets that you have to give up. But in terms of who you are, it doesn't erase that, but it gives you the opportunity to embrace something that transcends who you were before you became American. And once you embrace that, that changes you in a certain way, right? And it puts you in a position where you can become a genuine advocate for America, even though you still love your home country. You can become a genuine advocate. So for me, I don't have a dual citizenship. I gave up my other country's passport. When I go to my home country, I have to get a visa to go to my home country because my assimilation to
Yeah.
America was not halfway. I embraced it with all my heart. And I wish that
Same.
others would do the
I think
same.
that would solve a lot of problems that we have currently in this country.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us today. And as always, there is a further conversation that we're going to have for a few more minutes. And so, for those who want to hear our conversation after this, please go to willfulpositivity.com and subscribe, and we will continue the conversation there. But for those of you who are leaving us here, thank you so much for joining Restitch America. It was a wonderful conversation. And remember to go like, subscribe, follow us on social media. I am everywhere, Willful Positivity, on Instagram, on TikTok, and then under my name, Alma Ohene-Opare, on YouTube and on X. So go follow us and share this podcast with anyone who needs to hear that America can be put back together through civil conversation. I hope to see you next week.